because it's a potential area the examiner may want to test in the November 2025 diet. So please take note of it, as it was significantly not in the pilot questions and it was not tested last diet. Okay, so these are the group of questions that were tested. I was able to carve out everything. And some diets were skipped, and some diets had the question. So I was able to review 22 diets past the group accounts that were tested. So we'll be looking at some of the questions and answers in this 2-hour session we have, and wherever we stop, we stop. So you have the documents in PDF format already shared on the platform. So we may not be able to read through the questions like it's our custom, and we'll try to see how many questions we can cover. So please go through the questions. So I won't be reading the questions because of time. You already have it on the platform, so you can just open it with your handles, and let's just speak to the questions directly, so that will save a lot of time. All right, so question 1 is for November 2024 diet, and the question tested group accounts. It's a replicated question in a previous diet also. He reproduced this question in another way, but it was in an earlier diet he replicated this question. So it validates the fact that questions are sometimes repeated under the AAA-F framework or AAA-F paper. So take note of that. I'll start at required for question 1. So I'll not go through the question. We don't have time. So required question, the required part of the A part states that we should discuss the justification for the need for reassessment of materiality as the audit progresses, 6 marks. And the B part says assess and report the implications of the key audit findings for the completion of the audit. Your assessment must consider whether the key audit findings indicate a risk of material misstatement. Where the key audit findings refer to audit evidence, you must also consider the adequacy of the evidence obtained, but you do not need to recommend further specific procedures. Your answers must respond to the notes for the audit engagement partner and the key audit findings, 15 marks. Then for the C aspect, justify the reasons for the review of ISA 540, auditing accounting estimates, including fair value accounting estimates and related disclosures. Demonstrate how, with its proper application during the audit team can obtain sufficient appropriate audit evidence on management's processes and accounting for estimates, 9 marks. So there are different topics tested. We've seen some of these questions under different topics of the AAA-F paper, and we'll be looking at it solely under group audits in this part of the question. We've looked at it under materiality, which is chapter 7. We've looked at it under audit evidence, chapter 8. We've looked at some under chapter 9, evaluation and review. So today we'll be looking at the question as a group question, and we'll be speaking to it solely as a group audit question. All right. So having spoken to that, we have this question, and you will generally observe that question 1A speaks to materiality assessment and is a straightforward theoretical question directly testing ISA 320. ISA 320 is on materiality in planning and performing an audit. So based on this ISA, the A part, if you look at the answer, you will see that the answer was well structured, combining the formal ISA arrangements or requirements, speaking to the definition, performance materiality, with practical reasons for revision, speaking to changes in results during the audits, understanding the results and also estimates based on management's provision. So based on that, you see that the answer from my general observations for the A part is well structured. So for the B part, the key audit findings is the core application part of the question, speaking to combining elements of group audit around ISA 600. So the key audit findings speaks to ISA 600 group audits, ISA 500 audit evidence, and ISA 540 estimates, and also some specialized areas around IAS and IFRS. It requires the candidate, it requires us to analyze 9 distinct issues against the criteria of ISA 600. So it's a 15-mark question and presented in a table and a memo kind of format. Since it's an internal kind of report, a memo format will suffice. So there are a lot to talk about here since it's a 15-mark question, a whopping 15-mark question. So we need to provide context as to how to answer such a question. And you see that the solution actually provides or frames the response as a formal memo or a report. So you need to go through that very pragmatically and how it was answered. Then for the C part, is a theory question, I must say, on the auditing of accounting estimates. It requires explaining why the revision was necessary around scandals, the needs for skepticism, and what new requirements were introduced to ensure proper evidence is obtained. So that C part is more of a theory question, but I think in the current dispensation, it will be more of an applied question on the scenario. So those are the general observations based on these 3 questions. All right. Let's go back to what to and how to write it, or how to write our answer, some points on how to produce or write these kinds of answers. So for the A part, speaking to justification for reassessment for materiality, we have a 6-mark question, and the prompt is to discuss the justification. Discuss the justification. So what do we write? Start with a brief introduction, which will give you 1 mark. A brief introduction, and then you list and explain the key reasons why the initial set level might change, speaking to materiality. And key points must include change of the client and change in the inherent nature of the client's setting. So you need to take note of the change. And how do you write that? You need to use clear, distinct points to link the discussion back to the concept of materiality. So you need to ensure you mention the revision process is a mandatory requirement. Very important. So take note of that. And in doing that, you need to ensure that your writing is clear and lucid based on what the examiner has provided here. So read through the answers and ensure you provide context based on the application to the case scenario. And then for the B part, what do you write? The B part is replete with a lot of information in memo format. And you need to provide a formal memo, mostly because it's an internal memo between the audit manager and the engagement the engagement partner. You need to write around focusing on the accounting treatment around enough procedures performed. And you need to ensure that your presentation and your address needs to address most of the notes. It has to be briefly stated and using the table format. So the key audit findings are replete here with a lot of information. So you need to present them very clearly. And how do you write that? You need to clearly point and separately address them efficiently, because you need to maximize 1 mark per point. Your 1 mark, you are rewarded 1 mark each for each point you provide. So for example, the note around property disposal, the repurchase option is a loan and not a sale, because the junior did not discuss the option with management. So that's how you write that. And the implications of these key audit findings are 15 marks. It's about 15 marks. So we need to provide clear context to that and ensure that we discuss this loan option as an example. I just picked that as an example to be able to give a brief on how we are supposed to answer the B part, because it has a lot of marks. 15 marks is much. And if it's a compulsory question, you need to address it very pragmatically. Then for the C part, the C part's prompt speaks to the review of estimates. So justify the reasons for the review of ISA 540, auditing accounting estimates, including fair value accounting estimates and related disclosures. Okay, so based on this last prompt or this third question, we need to justify reasons for the review, speaking to why the old standard was inadequate. For example, the scandals, the increased complexity of estimates, and the need for professional skepticism. Then we need to demonstrate new requirements. We need to demonstrate our knowledge of the new requirements based on the revision of ISA 540. So the revision speaks to obtaining sufficient appropriate evidence, which is focused on the new mandatory steps like understanding management's estimates, evaluating the risks. Management estimates are high risk areas, checking those estimates and identifying loopholes. And how do you write that? You need to separate the answer into matching the prompts required. The prompt states justify the reasons and demonstrate based on the new ISA's revision to get your full mark. So you need to use a list format for the new requirements to provide clarity on that. So the revised ISAs are here, and some of the thoughts around the revision provides a lot of clear justification for that. So please read through the answers, and a lot of topics were tested actually, but under the group structure. So general strategies for earning these marks applicable to every other question you'll be answering is that you need to use IAS and ISA languages. So where you can remember explicitly in the exam, you need to clearly reference international standards, excuse me, in answering your questions. So you need to apply the standard names, the standard numbers where you remember. So try to practice around this to be able to glean from some of these nitty-gritties. Mentioning standards names would really earn you a lot of marks in addressing some of these questions. So ISA 320, materiality, 540 estimates, 500 audit evidence, 600 groups. Under such a question will really demonstrate high-level knowledge and professionalism, which is critical for this AAA-F advanced level paper. Secondly, don't forget structure is paramount. You need to use good formal structures like the table you can see and the memo format, the 2-column format, even without markdown, is the fastest and clearest way to answer all these questions and present your points clearly to score marks efficiently. So it's a 15-mark question. So a table like the examiner presented is a good structure for you to employ and deploy during answering questions in that regard. Also, try to address all parts of the prompt. So for question 1B, ensure you address the and every application note. There's and in the question 1B part. Access and report. Don't forget 2 prompts, access and report. Very important to address based on those questions. Then try to know the value or the marking value. So question 1B is 15 marks for 9 points. So you have roughly 1.5 marks per point. Though the guide suggests 1 mark per point plus 1 point for the format. Let me look at the marking guide again. Okay. All right. So there's 1 mark per point plus 1 mark for that format. So ensure your discussion for each point is substantive enough to justify the mark, providing both the implication and the necessary action risk in that question. And for you to be guided based on the marking key, it's good you understand that for the first question, the A part, which is on materiality, justification for materiality, you have 6 marks. So the marking breakdown is 1 mark for definition and 5 marks for 5 distinct points on the need for reassessment. So be guided by ensuring your points cover the key practical drivers for change. Key drivers for change. So the required point, the first one around ISA 320, speaks to mentioning the revision. Mention the revision if new information comes to light during the audit. So the materiality has to be revised as the work comes, as the work is carried out. New information comes to light. There has to be a revision of materiality to pick 1 mark. And for the second mark, or the second point required, you need to try to link it to how the aggregate of uncorrected or undetected misstatements could exceed overall materiality. So to pick your point, you need to clarify that on the aggregate of uncorrected or undetected misstatements and how they could affect or exceed overall materiality. And for the third point, speaking to initial planning, you need to rely on forecast, on drafts around planning on materiality. You need to mention that to pick the third point. And the fourth point, you need to justify speaking to the high risk around materiality, leading to a lower figure based on the high risk of the initial materiality that was provided. And for the fifth point, speaking to the major disposal of a large division, like we have in note 7, you need to speak to that expressly on ending the fifth point. So that's 6 marks, 1 for definition and 5 for providing key practical drivers for change in materiality. Then for the B part, key audit findings, which is 15 marks, the marking breakdown provides 1 mark for the structure, the address, the memo format, and the marks for discussing each of the 9 key findings. So you need to be guided around focusing on specific risks, around evidence gaps, and you need to speak to most of those notes. So the note 2 and the question speaks to, if you look at the solution, the note 2, the note 2 talks about, where are the notes now? Permit me to, okay, that should be in the, okay. All right, so that's the note 2 based on the question. So in addressing the question, we have, based on note 2 now, we need to speak to property disposal, which should form part of our thoughts on those high-risk areas or evidence gap. The property disposal is a misclassification of revenue or gain on property disposed when it should be treated as substance over form based on IFRS 16 is inadequate. Management did not talk about that, so you need to address that issue of property disposal. Very, very key. Then note 3 on evaluation is a material misstatement. The initial assessment was wrong and is inadequate, so you need to address the evaluation. Then note 4 around actuarial loss is also a misstatement, is inadequate. Reliance solely on this is insufficient for a complex material estimate. So the auditor needs to assess the need of an expert to obtain evidence based on ISA 500 and also perform procedures. And for note 5 on goodwill, note 5 on goodwill is a misstatement based on IAS 36. This is inadequate. The arithmetical check is insufficient. The auditor must check the use of goodwill and test for impairment also. And for note 6, based on this, the associate, we have an associate is also a misstatement and is inadequate also. IAS 28 on associate is required, meaning the account should be moved and be checked for income impairment, not just being static. And for the loan, which is note, I think note 9, the loan was obtained. So the loan is a default on repayment and is understated. So there's need for repayment status and a full accrual of interest. So you need to point that out, which are key audit findings based on the prompt, assess and point it out very clearly. And for the marking guide on the last C part, we need to pick 3 marks. It's a 9-mark question. So the marking breakdown talks about 3 marks for issues before the review and 6 marks on how to get sufficient appropriate audit evidence. So be guided by, number 1, the reasons for the review, which is 3 marks. You need to focus on the need for increased estimates, dealing with estimates, especially fair values, and also addressing identification of these corporate scandals. And for the 6 marks, talking about the new requirements, you need to list the key new steps that require engagement with management's process by focusing on, number 1, understanding management's estimates, how they came about these estimates, evaluate how management came about these estimates, and any possible bias around these estimates, access and identify how management came about the estimates, evaluate whether management considered a lot of prior year results to some of these estimates they came up with. So that should inform your answer to earn the 6 marks in that second part to get sufficient appropriate audit evidence. All right, so those are my thoughts on how you could generate or provide context to such a question on groups that splitted around different topics, materiality, planning, sufficient audit evidence, evaluation and review, speaking to audit accounting estimates, and you will need to practice the question over and over again so that you have the grasp of how to address such a question if you need to choose it under exam condition. All right, so that's it for that question on auditing of the group, speaking to group ISA 600. All right, so any question, any contribution, any observation on this question? Do we have any questions? Okay, if we don't, then let's look at the next question. Like I said, for those joining earlier, we have the We have the questions on the platform already. It's complete. It's the complete review of 22 diets from May 2025 down to November 2014. So everything is complete there for you to look at. So we'll not be reading through the questions because of time. We'll just share some thoughts on how to address and how to attack the question. All right. So the next diet tested group audits was November 2023, and that was question 2, DOBS PLC. So you have the question, please read through, and we'll not be reading the question because of time. So DOBS PLC question, we are required to A, prepare the list of items to be included in the letter of instruction TRC and Co should send to Tim Brown and Co. So TRC and Co is the group auditors, while Tim Brown and Co are the component auditors. So the letter of instruction, we spoke to that expressly in the classes in our slides. A letter instruction is issued from the group auditor to the component auditor. Then for the B part, for the purpose of ensuring that the financial statements are properly consolidated, prepare a document outlining the audit procedures 3RC and Co needs to adopt, 9 marks. And for the C part, evaluate the nature of the business risk approach to be adopted by TRC and Co in the review of ABC Limited during the audit, 5 marks. So a total of 20 marks is awarded to this question. And you generally observe that the question tests the crucial area of group audits, which is ISA 600 and the modern risk-based approach. I think we've looked at that C aspect of the question under chapter 6 or so, chapter 6, speaking to audit approach. Now, the part A talks about letter of instruction. It's a direct test. The part A prompt for this question talks about preparing a list. So you see there is a direct test of ISA 600 communication requirements between the group auditor and the component auditor. So it's a straightforward recall question. Communication between the group auditor and the component auditor. Then for the B aspect, the consolidation procedures requires a high-level practical listing of audit procedures necessary to confirm the accuracy and the compliance of financial statements consolidation. So the part B actually assesses our knowledge across several accounting standards around IFRS 3, business combination, and IAS 24 on related party within the audit context. Therefore, the C part is speaking to business risk approach. It actually tests our conceptual knowledge of testing the understanding of the top-down approach in auditing. And it requires us to define the approach and explain how non-financial risk, like the public criticism of ABC Limited, translates into risks of material misstatement. Okay, so generally, those are my observations of the question. And in writing or answering the A part, let's look at what to write. So the A part asks us to prepare the list of items to be included in the letter of instruction TRC should send to Tim Brown and Co. All right, so let's look at the answer now. We are asked to prepare a list. So what do we write? You need to list the 8 essential communication elements required by ISA 600 that sets out the scope and rules for the component auditor's work. So how do you write that? Use a number. The prompt is saying list. So you just use a numbered or bulleted list for clarity. So focus on the core categories, the scope of work, the ethical rules, seeking to independence, the materiality level applicable to the component, speaking to component materiality, the significant risk identified at the group level, and the required form, content of the component auditor's report. Those are your thoughts. Those are what you should center your thoughts around in addressing how to write such a question. So the solution the examiner provided is clear on some of the list you should provide to be able to pick the 6 marks very seamlessly. Then for the B aspect, the prompt asks us to For the purpose of ensuring that the financial statements are properly consolidated, prepare a document outlining the audit procedure TRC and co needs to adopt. So we have a 9-mark question there. So what do you write? You need to outline a structured list of audit steps to verify the consolidation process. Procedures should logically cover the entire process from data aggregation to final adjustment. So how do you write that? Group procedures should be, you provide your group procedures under clear headers. So for example, clerical accuracy, investment status, consolidation, adjustment. So ensure the procedures are specific, such as checking the elimination of intercompany balances, calculation of purchased goodwill, elimination of unrealized profit, and calculation of NCIs, which is non-controlling in interest. We shared a lot of thoughts on that all through the lecture and classes. So go through the solution. It's replete with a lot of information on how to address that B part 9-mark question. Then for the C aspect, in evaluating, the prompt asks us to evaluate the nature of the business risk approach to be adopted by TRC and co in the review of ABC Limited during the audit. So this is a 5-mark question. What do you write? You need to define the approach. Explain that it is a top-down strategy. And in explaining its purpose, you need to share thoughts around understanding the client's business context and strategy to better access the inherent and control risks that ultimately affects the financial statements. So how do you write that? Use clear sequential points in sharing your thoughts. So if you look at what the examiner provided here, you need to start by describing the approach as focusing on events and circumstances that affect the entity's ability to meet its objectives. So emphasize the connection around business risks, inherent and control risks, risk of material misstatements in financial statements, and the scenario's public criticism is a key business risk that TRC and co must evaluate for potential of financial statements impact. So for example, the product impairment is a significant risk you need to point out based on the case. So please take note of the solution and how the examiner provided that, and it will help you to practice very pragmatically. So generally, you need to strategize around such a question in practicing. Try to, like I said, some strategies for you to earn your marks, which is applicable to every question. Always try to reference the ISAs as you are practicing. It will make you remember. And if you don't remember, just state clearly what you remember based on your thoughts. But try to practice and align with ISAs. It will show that we are explicitly linking the question to governing international standards on auditing. So for example, ISA 600 applies to part A and B of the question. So also your strategic structuring, it's very essential here. Use clear subheaders and bullet points for listed based question around A and B. The prompt is for us to list, and your listing ensures every required point is distinct and is easily spotted by the examiner, and it will help you maximize your marks. So try to also use technical language, employ accurate auditing terminology such as engagement, group engagement team, component auditor, unrealized profit, non-controlling interest in such a question. So also try to contextualize apply your answers to the scenario. So part A and B are actually generic lists. So ensure part C references the specific scenario fact, like the public criticism of ABC Limited, to show how the business risk approach applies in practice to this question. It's very important. Okay, so let's look at the marking key now, and how to maximize our marks and the marking key. So for the A part, items for the letter of instruction is 6 marks. The marking key requires 1 mark for any 4 contents of the report. So totaling 6 marks, which implies 6 specific points are required for the full 6 marks. So aim to list 6 distinct points, like the work required on the component, which is ABC, limited, the use of the work by TRC and Co., the form and content of the component auditor's report around communication and reporting, the ethical requirements, especially independence, the component's materiality level, a list of known related parties, talking about Dobbs PLC and ABC Limited, which are related parties. Should form your thoughts around picking the 6 marks on this question. Then for the B part, speaking to the consolidation audit procedures, which is 9 marks. The marking key awards 1 mark each and 3 marks for discussion. 1 mark for listing and 3 marks for discussion. 0.5 marks or half mark per procedure. So provide 6 procedures and with brief explanations of why the procedure is necessary. So some thoughts around some of the procedures you could provide. Number 1 is clerical accuracy. You need to check for transfer and arithmetical accuracy of the consolidation schedules. Then for investment status, which is number 2, you need to confirm the accounting treatment. For example, consolidation of ABC is appropriate. Then for number 3, intercompany elimination, you need to check that all balances and transactions between Dobbs and ABC are removed or eliminated. Then for adjustments on profit of intergroup inventory or fixed asset transfer, you need to check for arithmetic calculations and accuracy. Then number 5, for goodwill and non-controlling interest, you need to verify the calculations and accounting for purchased goodwill and also that of non-controlling interest. And for accounting policies, you need to confirm uniformity of accounting policies across the subsidiaries and associates, Dobbs PLC and ABC Limited. So you need to focus on that to be able to earn your 9 marks clearly. Then for the C aspect, the marking key requires 5 distinct points, which is 1 mark each. So number 1 is the top-down approach, starting with the business. And number 2, seeking to understand events and circumstances affecting the client's strategic objectives. And number 3 is identifying business risks that the auditor can better assess, talking about inherent and control risks. And number 4 is requiring industry-specific knowledge and continuous awareness of future developments. Number 5, the auditor uses business risks only to determine their impact on the risk of material misstatements in the financial statement. So, for example, like we said, the public criticism may lead to a product or asset impairment or litigation liabilities for the company based on the case scenario on this question. So that's how to maximize your marks based on the marking key. So please be mark conscious as you write so that you can earn your marks very, very seamlessly. All right, so any questions, any thoughts, any contributions, any challenge based on this question? We are kind of quiet. Nobody has spoken today. Is Sammy on the call? I don't think Sammy is on the call today. All right, so any questions, any contributions?
Yeah, listening to the lecture is going fine.
Are you sure, sir?
Yes, sir. I want to ask the way it is being answered is exactly what is in the pack. Step by step, they just pick everything words by words. Are we going to cram it and dump it out?
No, please, don't cram it and dump it out, beg, so that you don't get shot in the foot. So what you do is, based on the current dispensation, try to apply it to the scenario. If you look at the pilot now, it may not come this way, but then if you understand the concept, you'll be able to apply it to the question. So the current dispensation requires more shorter answers now, not long list of answers. So try to follow the prompt, then try to be brief in your answer. So I would suggest you use the pilot as a guide in answering. So if you compare the last dispensation with the current dispensation, you see that your answers should be a kind of shorter. So let it not be.
That's very short.
Yes, the pilot questions are much more shorter. So they are gravitating towards ACCA kind of short answers. ACCA's answers are quite short like that, based on the pilot. So use the pilot as a guide so that you don't carry what is in the study text and post or paste for them. Just answer it based. Yes, go ahead. Yeah, go ahead. You're sharing some thoughts, sir.
Because time.
Sorry, I didn't catch that.
The time in the examination time.
Yes, that's another thing. Time management.
Yes. Good evening, sir.
Yeah, good evening, Hassan. It's nice to have you after a long while. Welcome back.
Yeah, exactly. I would like to just comment on the C aspect because when you look at the solution of the C aspect, they actually did not link to the scenario. Yeah. So what they did was just to talk about what the business risk entails. What the business is all about. They talk about the major issue that has to do with business risks, but they did not link it to the question. So I don't know if during exam situation, I don't know if you link your answer to the scenario, whether that will going to fetch you the required marks, or you just go ahead and the way they address it here, you go ahead and just talk about the issues around business risks and then conclude the case. I don't know whether that whether the first approach, meaning if you link it to the scenario and bring out the issue, especially the issue you talk about, the issues raised that has to do with the marketing. I think that's what in this scenario they raise, the issues they raise. So I don't know if you walk around that one and bring out some of the risks and discuss it, that one will going to fetch you mark, or you're going to just talk about the business risk in general as they did it in that question now and in the solution. That's what they did actually. They didn't link it to the scenario. So sometimes these are some of the challenges in AAA, essentially speaking. I don't know how. There are sometimes they are mixing up the things. You will be thinking that to link to the scenario, but when you see the solution, sometimes from the marking scheme, you see that they will not link to the scenario.
I agree absolutely. It's a dilemma. But you see, in that last part, if I were in the exams, I will link it to the scenario, because look at that last paragraph. He said there are issues with the marketing of the products of ABC Limited, and there have been criticisms in the public domain in the last 2 quarters. The audit of the 2 companies are going. So please, linking this to the scenario is good for the C aspect, irrespective of the solution. Because at times you'll be wondering, I wrote what is in the solution now or in the study pack and I didn't pass. I would suggest that please link it to the scenario. In answering your question expressly, please link it to the scenario. At least state what happened in this last paragraph, the issues with public criticism around the products. And because you see, the auditor using business risk solely to determine the impact on risk of material misstatement in the financial statement is very important. So that public criticism should be linked back to the question, irrespective of the solution. And the current dispensation would need you to address questions based on the scenario. So try to link it. Don't produce directly what is in this solution. I would suggest you use this as a guide and try to identify. Now look at the examiner's report. He said the common principle was lack of understanding of detailed aspect of the responsibility of brief. Okay, candidates are applied. All right, he didn't even say, okay, candidates are further to identify the risk associated with working. Okay, he didn't even talk about linking it back to the scenario. So Hassan, please, I suggest that let's link it back to the scenario, because the question say evaluate the nature of the business risk to be adopted by TRC in the review of ABC Limited during the audit. And in reviewing ABC Limited, you found out the marketing of products, there was criticism in the public domain in the last 2 quarters. I suggest you reference that irrespective of the solution, please. Don't copy the solution Mr. Mike said. Yeah, go ahead.
I understand, but can one be able to probably maybe talk on the business itself, maybe a few sentences, then you go back and link to the scenario. Can you adopt
Absolutely.
the two strategies?
The two approach, absolutely. So you are building up on what the solution did, exactly. So the solution gave us like more of theory or generic answers. Then you build on that to add to the scenario so that you can clinch that 5 marks. That's what I would do under exam conditions. So yes, absolutely. In answering your question succinctly, yes.
All right, thank you.
All right. Thank you for that very powerful engagement. So I'm glad you are noting some of the issues around the solution. Then some of my thoughts, I always share my thoughts around applying it to the scenario very, very practically. So I'll read a question, and even if the solution provides generic answers, I would like to build on that, which is a fantastic question Hassan asked. The difference between what is in the what is on the Pathfinder solution and what is in what should be our thoughts on what we should provide. Okay, so good engagements. Thank you, Mike. Thank you, Hassan, for that. Let's look at this last question before we go on break. May 2023, and the question is on Messrs PK Industries Limited. So please go through the question. You have the slides, or you have the document on the platform. So, excuse me, the C part asks us to prepare the key guidelines to the audit in accordance with ISA 600, 4 marks. So the A and the B aspects were not expressly testing ISA 600. But the C aspect, which is 4 marks, asks us to prepare key guidelines to the audit in accordance with ISA 600. Okay, so I think I need to realign these pages. It's supposed to be on the next page. So I will share this document and realign this. I think it was when I was preparing the document. Okay, so let's share some thoughts on this last question before we go on break. You generally observe that it's actually a theoretical question testing the core principles and the requirements of ISA 600. And ISA 600 speaks to specific considerations on the audits of group financial statements. And if you read the scenario, it provides the context of PK Industries in Nigeria and the subsidiaries in Ghana, where the two components are audited by different firms. The requirement is to recall the high-level guidance that the group engagement team, GET, must follow. So group engagement team, you can use GET for your acronym, an acronym for you to remember. So briefly, how do you, what do you write and how do you answer such a question? So in writing, provide the 4 most critical steps or decision the GETs, which is the Nigeria auditor in this case, must undertake when auditing the consolidated financial statements, particularly when a component auditor, which is the Ghana auditor, is involved. You need to focus on the required involvement and communication between the group auditor and the component auditor. So how do you write that? As you can see, based on the answers the examiner provided, you need to use a numbered or bulleted list. The focus should be on the procedural requirements set out in ISA 600. So number 1 is acceptance and continuance. The group engagement team must first assess whether they can be sufficiently involved in the component auditor's work to obtain sufficient appropriate evidence for the group's opinion. So acceptance and continuance must first be ascertained. Secondly, you need to understand the group and the risk. You need to understand the group and the risk. The group engagement team must obtain a thorough understanding of the entire group structure, the components, and the environment to assess the risk of material misstatement at the group level. This is very important. Then for the component auditor's assessment, the group engagement team must evaluate the competence and ethical compliance of the component auditor. Number 4, the group engagement team must determine materiality. Materiality determination now is the 4th point. So for the group as a whole and the appropriate component materiality levels for the component auditor's work must be determined by the group auditors. And number 5 is the response to assessed risk. How will the group auditors get involved? So the group engagement team must decide the type and extent of involvement in the components auditors' work, which includes requiring an audit of financially significant components and auditing specific risk areas, high risk areas, like we spoke about in the lectures. So it's very important to align your thoughts practically based on the prompts. And if you can inject some aspect of aligning with this case scenario, please do in building up what solution the examiner has provided to us here. Also, general strategies, like I used to say in answering such questions, is applicable to all questions. You need to reference the key ISAs, always name the relevant ISA. By now, you should be able to have known that group audits is ISA 600. And it provides immediate context and technical credit for such references. So focus on the key marks. The marks are 4 marks available for a topic with this kind of. So choose the most fundamental high-level guidance of ISA 600 around acceptance, continuance, risk assessment, communication, and materiality. So try to also use the technical terminologies around group audit engagement. I gave an acronym GET, G-E-T, component auditor, sufficient appropriate evidence, component materiality, group-wide control. So all those technical terminologies should be integrated into your answers. And also prioritize requirements over explanation. So for a list-based question, somebody trying to say something?
Okay.
All right. So for a list-based question, I was saying that you need to provide 4 and correct points concisely rather than providing lengthy explanations. So the current dispensation will need us to be very, very direct to the point. So be careful with how much you write so you don't go out of context. And it's very important to follow the marking guide by ensuring that based on the marking guide we see on the screen, we have 1 mark for each point you provide. So the goal is to provide 4 distinct and technically accurate requirements from ISA 600. So number 1 is acceptance and involvement. Decide whether to accept or continue the appointment by considering if the group engagement team can achieve its objective around obtaining sufficient appropriate evidence and the sufficient involvement in the component audit work to obtain that evidence. Number 2 is risk assessment. We've spoken about that. Number 3 is component auditors evaluation. And number 4 is materiality. So your thoughts should center around this and speak to that very pragmatically. All right. So that's it for that short question on the guidelines to audit in accordance with ISA 600. Any question? Any contribution? Any observation? So we can stop here and go on break.